Hello, and welcome to my show, The Thriving Woman. I am your host, Carmel Austin.
Monday, another week, I can't believe I'm counting down the minutes till it's Tuesday. Another day back on.
I will be sharing keys to help you form healthy hearts and boundaries. I'll see you in the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Thriving Woman. This is season 4, and I have my beautiful partner, Stephanie, on with me today. Today's going to be a little bit different because Stephanie is going to be actually interviewing me. We've had some exciting things. As you all know, Stephanie and I have got our Journey to Wholeness series, and we've got 2 books with that. And we've got some other things coming up with our series as well. And I've been working on some of my own projects, as Stephanie has as well. So Stephanie is going to take the lead, and we're going to chat about what Carmel's been up to as well as what Stephanie's been up to. So welcome, Stephanie, to another episode of The Thriving Woman.
Awesome. I love being here. You know that. This is one of my favorite places to show up and just chat all things creativity, writing, spiritual growth, wholeness, all the things. So I'm so excited today that I'm going to be interviewing you. So I guess you are in the hot seat, so to speak, right? So I know that we have worked together on several projects, right? Multiple collaborations. We had a course together. We have a lot of visionary plans in the future to kind of get things going and even elevate them a couple of notches. And don't worry, listeners, we will share a little bit more about that later on. But we've also been faithful to write and to create what God has spoken in our hearts long, long ago. And I know for you, that is your children's book. That is the children's book that you have been working on. That has been the project that God says, this is the time and this is now. So I would love to hear more about that journey of bringing that idea of, wouldn't it be nice one day to have a children's book that shared this story, to actually at this point being close to having that tangible story rich with your family history in your hand.
Yes, well, thank you, Stephanie. That is so true. And I think too that, it was only a couple of years ago that I realized when I was running a creative writing course, that the book that I wrote more than 10 years before, when I was at TAFE becoming a website developer, it actually was about me coming to Jarvis Bay and visiting my auntie and uncle at Kalala Bay. And that was their holiday home when I was a little girl. But our subject too was about the environment and about the local environment. And of course, my husband and I have been living down here for nearly 40 years now. We just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. And when we first got married, my auntie and uncle retired to what was their holiday house. My uncle actually built that whole house with his own hands.
Wow.
But when we were young, there were just a few rooms, and we used to wash in a bucket and the toilet was outside. But it was so much fun as kids, where our cousins, we'd all meet at my auntie's, because she just would do all the fun things. If we weren't at Kalala Bay in the holidays, she would take us into the city on the train, and we would go to Circular Quay and Manly, and that's a ferry ride, and we would see my grandfather fishing at the quay. And so I have so many childhood memories, and even, fortnightly we'd all get together when we were younger too at her house with all the family. So many things. And then yeah, when I had this story that we had to write for my project for when I was at TAFE, I was like, what are we doing this for? And then I realized later the teacher had told me she actually was running the local writing group.
Oh, wow.
And she invited me to come, but at that stage, I'd just come back from Israel and I had started Camel's Garden and I was learning websites and how to create them and learning so many things about my business. I've been importing product from Israel and I still have some prayer shawls and some jewelry, which are actually now on my new website. I have a new shop and I've had a shop in the past with different websites as well. So, it's always been Camel's Garden. I sort of came back and I really felt God wanted me to call it that because my name means garden and Carmel Carmel means garden and, visiting that land and the experience that I had. So, back then I was sort of wrapped up in all that, but I wrote this story and I had to present it. And I presented it like I was presenting it to my preschool kids because for 20 years I worked in centres. I worked in long day care centres. I worked in preschools. I travelled around. I did after school care as well. And I love children and I love presenting and I love reading stories to my grandchildren and my nieces and nephews. So, it was fun, and we were all supposed to write it, but the other two people just didn't know what to do and it just flowed out of me. And then I
Yeah.
presented it and I had this dream about illustrating it and then publishing it. And it just, nothing was happening. And then, go back and fast forward, we've got books that we've written and
Yeah.
stories and
Yeah.
everything with that. So here I am, on the, I can't say the word. I'm on. It's coming to my head, but it's not coming out of me. That's what happens when you have Erlen. Where the book's going to come out this year, and it's gone to a formatter, and we're working on design. And you read the story for me as well,
I
Stephanie.
did.
And what did you say to me? You said more. Give me more.
I did. I did. I said more. I was invested in these characters. I wanted to know what happened, when happened, and what was going to happen next. And I told you, you got to keep going.
And so,
Absolutely.
in the middle of it all, what did I do, Stephanie? I finished the book.
You did. You did.
And, the story, I had to tweak it a little bit more, and I'm still tweaking it. But, I finished the story. And what's exciting about that is that through it all, as Stephanie and I decided to do this process,
Yeah.
I realized that there's been like a timeline from my childhood to now of how God has put everything into place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Stephanie, I know you asked me about it and all those processes. So here we are. My book is going to be coming out shortly. It's called Adventure Cove. It's about two kids who come down from Sydney to their grandmother's house at Jarvis Bay, and there's a big marine park that's been built. And if you know anything about the area I live in, Jarvis Bay is still just a sleepy town, and they have lots of visitors that come. But the story is about a dolphin called Silver, and he's an animated character who comes to life. And in my original story, he walked and talked and did all those things. But when you write a whole book and a whole story on it, you have to tweak some things and, make sure it all flows. So, yeah. And he is the marine park. But the Marine Bay, he's the one that he looks after everything there. So there's some twists and turns and some mysteries and what's happening in the story. And the kids want to help him. And yeah, it's the first book in the series about my dolphin called Silver.
Yes, yes, I love that. Absolutely. And I want to just back up just a second to something that you said about you could see from childhood to now, like where God has put the pieces and the puzzles in place. And that's what I had noted too. It's that it's your childhood memories, it's your story, it's a development of your storytelling and your confidence in storytelling, right? It's all of that progressing to where your point is now. And for those who are watching and listening, and if you have a book inside of you, I think it's one of those things where sometimes the first thing we write is not the first thing that is published, right? And so you had written this and it took time. It needed to kind of marinate, it needed to kind of settle. You needed to grow and evolve and produce other beautiful books, right? And be a part of all those other great opportunities. And then at that, after that, then you're able to kind of pick it back up and just breathe that life into it, with just the opportunities and the excitement and the passion. And I just love hearing you talk about your story because your excitement and your enthusiasm for Silver and the kids and the scene and the sea and the Adventure Cove and all of that, it just spills over. And so, who could not be excited when your excitement and your enthusiasm is that contagious? So, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit more about Adventure Cove? So, how does that draw directly to your childhood? Where does that come from exactly?
Well, when, like I said, I used to go to my Auntie Sal's place and my Uncle Sid's place when we were little. And when we went to Kalala Bay, there were the horses, the honey, the seashells, the oyster shells, Uncle Sid's boat. There was Uncle Mick's house, and he had a pink cocky. And he used to talk to you. And then I think, so there were two houses, lots of land, lots of wild horses. I remember the honeybee, the big honey, whatever they're called, they were out in the bush. And
Yeah.
then there were a couple of houses that were on the, like around the coast on the point. Now, Kalala Bay is a whole community, with schools and shops, but it's still country. It's still like, it's about 20 minutes, half an hour from here. And my husband and I, one of the reasons why we moved to the country and to this area was because of my auntie. My auntie was my kindred spirit. She just made life so much fun, not just at Kalala Bay, at Hanley Vale. My sister Linda and I'd go there and we'd stay the night and we'd come out and she was cooking cakes. She loved cooking fruit cakes and the whole house smelled of them. And Uncle Sid had his little table where he had his breakfast set up and they had their little dog. And, just the fun and they were like a couple of suburbs away and Linda and I could walk there. And as we walked there, we'd play on the play equipment and then we'd walk across this big rickety old bridge that I hated it when the train went by because the whole bridge swung. And I wasn't very adventurous in those days. And then we'd go over to her home and, we'd hang out there and her grandchildren would come and our cousins would come and we had lots of fun together. And then there were so many times. So, my sisters, they moved to the Central Coast, but I came to the South Coast to be near my auntie, and my husband loves, he got another motorbike and we lived on a farm and we just love that lifestyle of being in the country. We've got mountains sort of right there in front of us and we've got the ocean there as
Yeah,
well. So,
beautiful.
it just evolved. Like we moved down here nearly 40 years ago and she'd already retired down here, her and Uncle Sid. And in the holidays, her daughters came down from Queensland and we always went out and then my mum and dad would come and stay and go out and visit and then other family, they'd stay in their little caravan in the backyard. And that's why I wanted a caravan because I go get in her little caravan. So, we've got a little caravan. So much of my life has evolved around this place, Kalala Bay, Chapman Street. And here I am looking at it and thinking, oh my goodness, that's my story. That's my book. That's my dolphin. That's, and my cousin actually has swum with the dolphins at Kalala Bay.
There you go.
And then
Yes.
we've collected the seashells and we've walked to Red Rock and we've swum in the water. And I still go out to Kalala Beach and swim out there and meet friends and family and take my grandchildren there. And when sadly, my auntie passed away last year, and we went out there and we collected some shells. The house is still there. The people who brought it, it's still there.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's so many childhood memories and memories of me, just just in my life living down here in the Shellhaven on the south coast. So there's so much of that creativity and that with the book. And I look at the story, and as I, wrote it, it just flowed out of me more than 10 years ago at TAFE. And then as I finished it, it's just brought up so much of who I am as that little girl, that creative who used to love the school, the library bus coming to the school, and me getting in there and looking at all the pictures and the illustrations and wanting to be a sign writer and loving to write things and draw things and dance and create everything creative, cooking, quilting now. I love doing my quilting. And so it's just me. The book's about me. It just is the right time for it to be published, and the right time. And I started to illustrate it, but you know how busy I am, Stephanie.
I do. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
But I love it. It's not a job. It's an enjoyment.
Right. Right.
And if anyone has heard my story, my children have grown up in heaven. They would have been 30 this year, or around 30, coming up to 30. I've had some heartaches in my day. I've got my beautiful box of some things that my auntie knitted and some treasures and a letter I wrote to them. And, my granddaughter and I go through it occasionally, and it brings tears to my eyes. And my granddaughter is a beautiful family that adopted me from church. And, so there's a whole story of craziness around my life. And then with the cover, Angela, who she did the cover for the Artist Haven, and it's so beautiful, isn't it, Stephanie?
It is. It's one of my favorites.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I decided to ask Angela, would she paint the cover? So she's given me 3 different pictures, and my granddaughter and I picked one, and we started to create the cover. Because as you know, Stephanie, this will be the 4th thing that I've created, because I've got the magazine, 2 books, and now, I've got the cover, and it's nearly finished. And we've got lovely Doris, who always has a bit of an eye for design, who always puts her little 2 cents worth in. But now I sort of have a style, and I know sort of how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And then it's just doing all the fine details of how I want the book to come to life. But, when I look at it, it's about adventure, fun, kids, animals, environment. I put a section at the back of it for kids, for activities, to talk about their emotions, their feelings. How can we make sure our beaches and our environment, is safe? It's about family. Actually, Lucinda, the young girl in it, she travels to Queensland to visit her aunt Thelma, which is actually my Auntie Sal.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just every part of it is actually about me and that little girl
Hmm.
who he's now an author, a publisher, an illustrator, a speaker, an international best-selling author. And I go, who's this? Who's this
Yeah.
person?
Yeah.
And the dreams come alive as I've spent that time working on all these things, and really like being okay about my losses, and really getting hold of the things I've gone through and developing my blessings.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, having been an advanced reader, or however you want to say it, and having the privilege and the opportunity to take a peek at the book, I think it does a little bit more than what you said. I actually think it captures the essence of childlike wonder and curiosity as little girls or little boys in that kind of mystical creation type setting. And then you are also incorporating this idea of a cause, right? And the cause would be the environment and the ocean and taking care of the ocean. And so I love the book for the fact that not only are you giving us kind of the story and the mystery and capturing that childlike wonder and just that special time of being at the sea and experiencing all of those memories with you, but you're also creating the story in such a way that maybe children who are not 100% aware of environment or ocean and things like that can start to understand, well, I don't want anything to happen to Silver. I don't want anything to happen to his friends. And so starting to build that awareness of that cause and of being able to just make those decisions to support the environment, right? And to protect the sea and protect the ocean. And so I love that and I told you this too, I love that you incorporated those questions and those exercises and those little things that for the children to do to be able to understand and reflect on Silver's story and the children and their responses and in a whole new way. And so I've already given a little bit of a preview into what the readers can expect, but in your mind, what do you hope and want the young children who are going to read this to take away from it? So, if there was one or two or maybe three key points of just above all else, this is what I want them to take away and tuck in their heart and carry with them, what would that be?
I want them to know that they're special and that they're loved and
Yeah.
that their creativity can flow from them like
Yes.
it does from me since I was a little girl. I want them to know that, yes, if you haven't had an ocean around you, you can learn, or the ones who live there. I want them to know that, things change in life. And, because with the story, there's a resort and it's impacting on the small
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And I want them to know that, you can keep that childhood wonder and
Mm-hmm.
that excitement. But I want them to know too that if they've got feelings and things happening in their life, because, I grew up with Erland syndrome and I didn't even know. I
Yeah.
couldn't read when I was a young girl, so I used to create things and draw pictures and imagine things and dance and do all those things. I never read the books, I just created it with my own life.
Yeah.
And so I want kids to know that they're special, whether, they're great readers or they're not great readers, whether their mum or dad has to sit with them and read it. And I want them to explore that the ocean is an amazing place that God has given us. And that, these animals in there, they are beautiful. I remember we had a show when I was a kid that was called Skipper and it was a dolphin and, and so all of those things that, the book is really talking, it really engulfs the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing about what the theme was, the environment and people and how we connect with the ocean and each other.
Yes,
Friendship,
absolutely.
lots of friendship.
Lots of friendship. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just, is adorable to throw in Silver. And I also got a sneak peek of Silver and what he looks like based on Angela, who designed the cover. And it's amazing once you have the character nailed down and illustrated that everything just kind of jumps and just comes to life. And so, yes, it's super, super exciting. So, what age would you say that this book now is suited for? And you mentioned something about a series. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, the story never ends. They got to meet Silver again at the beach. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk more about them grown and the effects on the environment and what's happening now that the resort's been there in a small community and, get the kids to think about all those things, that it's great to have all these great things and great resorts and events and things to go to. But what's it doing to our environment? Are we caring for
Mhm.
our environment? What are we bleaching our coral and, where does it all fit into? So, that's sort of where I will go with the next book. But at the moment, life's so busy with clients who are wanting to do their own books now, and then my own book too through my eyes. my new website and my book has just taken up the first part of the year. And it's okay because, it's not just I've got to do it all in 5 minutes. I've slowed down and I'm taking a breath and I'm looking at what's happened and where we're going and what we've been doing. And we met at the beginning of the year, didn't we, Stephanie? And we decided that we wouldn't do another book this year because life's too busy. Stephanie's busy and I'm busy, but we're busy being creative. We're busy in planting. I know Stephanie's got small children and I've got my grandchildren in my life and I'm doing it planning a house renovation now as well.
Yeah.
And so, everything creative just comes out of me. And I'm actually going to be looking at running a local creative group too with a lovely friend from church. So, we've got to fit it all in, don't we, Stephanie?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what's beautiful too, is when we take the foot off, take our foot off the gas, right? We take our foot off the gas, then God can come in and just help us coast. When you're doing it with God and creating with Him, not just for Him, but with Him, you don't feel like your foot is down, like slamming that gas pedal, going full throttle ahead, like tightly gripping the steering wheel, really fast and furious, but it is more of like a coast. It's more of like a cruising from one destination to another. And so, that being said, I know that you have lots of things in the works. So, please share with our listeners and viewers what else is next.
Well, when Adventure Cove does get come out, we're going to have a big, what's the word, a party.
A big
Like
party. Woohoo!
we do a big launch, and not just that, I've got a client's book that I'll be doing a launch on as well. And then, I've had this other book in my heart for years as well, my book called Through My Eyes, and that's about more of my family heritage. And I've wanted to do a cookbook as well. And so they've all sort of been put on the back burner. But then when I think about it, the kids' book is sort of part of my journey when I'm younger. And then, then the next book is about the recipes and life and family and traveling to Israel and Lebanon and Italian heritage and all those things. So that's going to be a big project, that'll take me a bit of time before all of that happens. And in that mix as well, Stephanie and I have talked about doing a webinar and some the next book in the series, Journey to Wholeness. We want to do a book called Brave New Chapters, and it just fits into the series because it's about self-care, and that's exactly the journey that I have been on, and Stephanie's learning to do that as well.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
And I do too, Stephanie, because we're in such different time zones. I'm up late at night. My husband does shifts work as well. And it's like, come on, you can do it tomorrow. But, when you're so excited and your creativity's flowing, you just can't help yourself. You want to do it then. And then, so we're in the winter season here. You guys are in summer. So, it's just slowing down and taking that breath. This year I had my 40th wedding anniversary and I turned 60. So they were big celebrations that I organised as well with my new website that still has some tweaking to do as well. So I'm growing and learning and designing all the time. But I think we decided, didn't we, Stephanie, that we wouldn't rush into another book, but we'd look at 2026.
Exactly. Exactly.
Starting there.
I think we learned that, well, the Bible says when the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. And the Bible also says that unless you build a house with the Lord, the workers labor in vain. And I, for one, do not want to labor in vain. And so I think that we have been very smart to kind of, again, for lack of a better word, like take our foot off the gas and try to push it and just allow God to guide it. Like, we know the project is coming. We know roughly what it's going to be, and Brave New Chapters is the title, and we know what we want to share as the third book in the Journey to Wholeness series. And so we have all of that here. And now we are honestly just waiting on God's timing to align everything and just direct our steps. And so it's super exciting to be able to continue on the Journey to Wholeness series. You know, the first book is The Artist Haven. So we talk about creative wholeness and creative wellness. And then the second book, we went really, really brave with the Courageous Voices Unlocked. We have some really vulnerable and hard stories that were shared in that book, but oh man, are they so powerful. And again, just journey to wholeness in terms of owning your voice and speaking up, not only for yourself, but speaking up and being the mouthpiece for others who will not or do not feel comfortable sharing and speaking up for themselves. And then now we move into the third book, The Brave New Chapters, at some point, right, next year, 2026, that will again give stories of transformation and healing from self-care and from setting boundaries. And so something that I, just shared that I'm still learning and I'm still growing in. And so, quite frankly, he's not finished with me yet. And I know he's not finished with you yet either, Carmel.
No, and I've got another magazine to get out this year as well. I did my first edition last year, and that was a miracle, Stephanie, because I had pneumonia, didn't I, when we put
Yes,
out
yes.
Courageous Voices Unlocked. It just came out of the blue. And then I had some issues too. I chopped my finger and
Mhm.
I tripped over my ironing cord when I was doing some a quilt for my niece's little baby who's over 12 months now. And I've had some issues as well. And like you've got to exercise, you've got to live, you've got a house to run. I've got other jobs outside of the house. Stephanie's got a young family, and I know she's been really busy as well, traveling and speaking and now I'm going to be committing to once a fortnight or once a month where I'm doing a local art therapy group and creating but I love that. I love to connect with my local people and then maybe next year I'm going to do a local writers conference as well. So, but we talk about them, but we have to hold them loosely, don't we,
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Because, I want to keep on doing this for another 10 years. I want to be able to take my time with it now. My new website, I developed that so I can slow down, and I got to learn some more things about it and just be okay about that and be okay that everything's in God's timing. Because when we look at my kids book, and when Stephanie asked me, I said, will you interview me? And then she asked me about questions. There was a timeline, wasn't there, Stephanie? What was it
Yes.
that you found that with that timeline, Stephanie, that intrigued you the most?
Well, now you're interviewing me. I don't know if that's allowed. No, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. I think that everything just fell into place and it just followed the sequence from one thing to the next to the next. That again, you could just kind of see all the cards laid out, so to speak, to where, things happen from the beginning to where you are at now.
Absolutely. And I'm like, when I was writing it, I was answering the questions and I just could see this timeline. And
Hmm.
I was just like, wow, God, you're amazing. And I'm not out of your timeline, I'm not out of your will. And I can, go to church and go to home group and go walking and go to the beach and take weekends off and spend time with my family and my grandchildren and connect with people,
Yeah.
and do those things in the community. I've been wanting to do something with the ladies for a couple of years, and it's been on my heart for a couple of years. So to see God unfolding that is just a blessing, because I can't sit here all the time.
Yeah.
And I need to be out moving and talking to people, and I just, the friends that I've made along the way, even just doing an art therapy group with the Women's Health Centre last year. So it's all part of the journey coming up to Brave New Chapters. It's all part of the journey of, Silver and my book, Adventure Cove, and I woke up with that title one morning, and that's what God does,
I love that.
and he gave me that name, and he's given me a name for my group, as our group as well, with my friend, for creativity. And so it's just like, all this creativity comes to us, but it's working out when it's it's going to come out. And I know I want to do, my book through my eyes, and it will come out.
Yes,
But I've got all these other projects, so I'm okay about saying that will come. But in the process, I'm grieving my auntie, and I had another auntie pass away last year, and we got another auntie unwell. Because when your parents, in their 90s, that happens. And my sister passed away not long after my dad, and it's 3 years last month. So, and I had a very dear friend from church pass as well. So we've all got things we've got to work through and trust God in the process. So, thank you, Stephanie, for, supporting me again, with reading my story, giving me really great feedback to help me grow that little bit more and to expand and finish that book. So that then when we do another book, it will be, another story and moving on from that. Because she said to me, is that it? I want more. And
I
so
know.
when I looked at that, I thought, yeah, it's not very big. Let's finish that. So it's taking a little bit longer, but it's all coming together. As you said, you've had the privilege to see, working with the formatter and all the things that are happening with that. And, I've got a new client too that I'm working with getting their book published. And then Shona Robin, who wrote her story in Courageous Voices Unlocked, we're going to be working as well on her book. So lots of books, lots of creativity, lots of blessings, lots of, podcast shows about creativity. So thank you, Stephanie, for again always being available, always coming and being willing to jump on board with all these amazing things that God gives me. And
Yes.
I'm just so thrilled too that, I'll be able to bless Stephanie with a book and she'll be able to read it to her kids or, and how lovely is that? That I can do that because she invests into me and I can give back to her and she can get a book in her hands and promote it and share it because, I want children to know that they're special and that we all go through things in life. But, here I am in my 60s, like living the dream. And I remember for years I used to see this parcel sitting up on the shelf that God had given to me, and it was collecting dust and it had a big ribbon on it. And I didn't know how to open it because of all the grief and the pain. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like there was this whole open door. And then Stephanie and I partnered together and, in our magazine as well, there's lots of creative stories and lots of stories. And my mission that I support now in East Timor and that my cousins started. So there's so many things coming with Carmel's Garden. And I just love that Stephanie is there with me, supporting me all the way. So thank you, Stephanie, and God bless you for joining me on another episode of The Thriving Woman. And I will say to you all, I will see you in another episode. God bless for now.
Take care.